Let's start with the Jags hosting the Los Angeles Chargers, a prime time home game in Duval County. People are going to be wasted. I am very much looking forward to it. Saturday, 8:15 p.m. in Jacksonville, Florida. Really fun matchup. You and I think, have taken a shine to this Jacksonville Jaguars team throughout the season, especially on offense. It's been such a fun pairing to watch what Trevor Lawrence has done with Doug Peterson. And you saw it all year. You know, the underlying efficiency numbers with this Jags offense have been good since the beginning of the season. Weird red zone turnovers, some bad luck, some bad stretches on defense. Looked like this was going to be another season from hell. They get red hot at a certain point, string together a few wins, have that miracle game against the Ravens, and kind of kick things off. Some stinkers mixed in there. They got absolutely snuffed out by the Lions, but get themselves to a week 18 playing game with the Titans, take care of business. And now we have one of the most exciting ascending young quarterbacks in the NFL in the playoffs against another team that has inspired the opposite sort of feelings, I think, for me this season, where the Jags have been this feisty upstart that have been fun to get behind. The Chargers have been frustrating at times. They've been maddening at times. I think a lot of people, including me, heaped some pretty large preseason expectations on them, felt like they were going to fall short. Then, again, through some miracle, when it seemed like they were dead in the water around Thanksgiving, their defense gets really hot. They get healthier on offense, get their receivers back, and they managed to get in. And now we have a matchup between, I think, two teams born of the football internet, two teams that nerds can get behind, and two of the most exciting, most enjoyable young quarterbacks in the NFL.
Absolutely. You're referring to that no one will probably be sober at this game. And that's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is usually hosted the Florida Georgia game in Jacksonville. It's kind of our own world's largest outdoor cocktail party is watching these quarterbacks play. I don't know if you're having drunk with fun on that Saturday show. Not actually drunk, but I'll be levitating probably after watching these quarterbacks. But no, I agree. That's what's so funny with the NFL season, just the ebbs and flows of it. And then one week it just seems like the bottom's falling out. Sometimes there's kind of a line, like you watch film, all 22 as coaches or players, and it's always not as good as it seems and not as bad as it seems. It's felt the same way with these teams at times. But if you told us in August, hey, the Jags and the Chargers are facing each other, first week of the playoffs, Jags won the AFC South, Chargers are the first wild card team, look at who's playing for them. The Chargers face some injuries, but Joey Bosa is playing again, and Mike Williams is banged up. But that's Keenan Allen's back at least. And the Jags made the playoffs, and they had a sneaky defense with really ascending Trevor Lawrence. We'd be like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds about right.
Yeah, but get behind that.
Sure didn't feel that way for plenty of these funny chunks of this season. But no, I'm really, this is probably the game I'm most excited to watch. Is this game, because talented teams but flawed, which I think is always a lot of fun, because, you get kind of not only just the schematic, who's going to take advantages there, what stars are going to step up, what role players are going to step up, who's not going to shine, who's going to get picked on by the opposing teams. Playoffs happen. Your weaknesses become even more glaring. So I'm beyond excited for this game. I think it's going to be a really, really fun one.
All right. Let's start with the Jags offense against the Chargers defense. Number one thing you're looking for on that side of the ball.
Number one thing is the interior of the Jags line, and I think that it's not a strength for them right now. They got Sheriff, but if you watch that Titans game, you see Trevor starting to get heated up as the game started going along, and maybe some of the woes started to happen with that. That was after the Troy Aikman, Trevor Lawrence should never throw the football again miss that he had in the end zone. So after that, but why I'm saying that is the Chargers interior of their line is not their strong suit as well. You have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the outside. Yes, that is an issue, but I think Trevor is better at mitigating that. I also think the Jaguars offense being so the time to throw is usually shorter, because they throw a lot of shorter passes to the sides. They throw a lot of screens. They kind of mix in there are a lot of movement throws. I think that is a good way to, nullify this rush of Bosa and Mack that can give a lot of tackles issues on the outside. What I am really curious to watch is third and fourth down with these two teams. Brandon Staley has been in his bag lately and has been a very fun back to like, oh, wow, this is interesting to watch and in different ways, especially on 3rd and 4th down, than I would expect out of this defense, this Chargers defense. I want to see what he leans into this game. Against the Dolphins game, he lead into some different coverages. Every game, he kind of is very game planning with his stuff. I'm curious against this Jags defense or Jags offense. I think one thing that they might have a real big advantage of, and it's going to sound niche, but it matters, is Derwin James as a blitzer going against Travis Etienne or Hasty as a pass protector. And I think that is a huge advantage. James has an advantage over most running backs. Travis Etienne has improved as a pass protector. He's still below average as far as his eyes and as far as his as being a protector in both things. So as he has improved, well, that's interesting to me, because if you want, they do want to start attacking down the field, the Jaguars, and maybe trying to find some play action plays or some plays down the field where they have to actually protect. That's a way to get after them, is make their running backs protect. Hey, let's have one of the best blitzing safeties, if not the best blitzing DB in the entire league. Let's get them. Let's get after them. Maybe heat them up in that way as well. So I'm really curious if they lean into that, if they lean into more pressures. I think that's going to be one matchup I'm really excited to watch.
How they try to get after the quarterback is my biggest question. Chargers are 6th in the NFL in blitz rate. 35% of dropbacks this season, according to Next Gen Stats. Wow. Which that was not his MO when he was coming from Los Angeles. They blitzed a decent amount last year, but they're blitzing even more now. And some of the pressure stuff they're doing is some of the most interesting things that are happening on that defense and on that team right now. Mm-hmm. And in the first game between these two teams, Lawrence was pressured at the 2nd lowest rate of his career, 12.8% of his dropbacks. So how do they try to heat him up? Do they decide we need to bring pressure, or do they feel like with Bosa and Mack, Bosa played 13 snaps last time these two teams played, we can get after him? Because the Chargers over the last month of the season have the highest sack rate in the league on non-blitzes. So do they show pressure and bring 4 just to kind of give it that one extra beat, just to make him think one more? And I want to see how they're going to use Derwin as part of that plan, not just as a blitzer, but do we see him around the line of scrimmage a little bit more if they're trying to play some man coverage and him covering Evan Ingram? Because I think Ingram is such a matchup problem for a lot of defenses around the league, but the Chargers have somebody that I think is uniquely equipped to handle him. And that, outside of the blitzing, is probably the most staggering difference that we've seen from the Chargers under Brandon Staley this season. They're playing cover 1 about 28% of the time, which is the 8th highest rate in the league. If you go back to 2020, they played zone 81% of the time on those Rams teams. So this defense looks a lot different than the Staley defense that we talked so much about a couple of years ago. So do they lean into that a little bit and say, we're going to play some man because we think that we have a guy who can erase what is often one of your best matchups, and we'll see what Bryce Callahan can do against Christian Kirk in the slot, because that's how the Jags have been creating a lot of their vertical shots, is Kirk on those slot fades and from those inside alignments. Callahan is a decent answer to that. And do the Chargers feel comfortable with that matchup? So I'll be curious to see that.
And that's a great point. I mean, even thinking of week 18, when does Trevor go to those slot fades? When he thinks he has a matchup advantage. What if he thinks
Trey Avery, Amani Hooker?
Yep. He's smart. He knows when to attack, but what if it's all neutral? What if, do I have an advantage there? Oh, I think I do. I'm going to try it, but maybe they don't all win, but that's a great point. I think another thing is the Chargers are pretty damn good at defending screens, which is a huge part of the Jags offense. They have that Andy Reid to them, where ton of tight end screens, ton of running back screens, ton of motion screens. If Jamal Agnew's in the game, he's getting the freaking ball. That was one of the most, I couldn't believe it. I'm watching this game. Sorry, sidebar. I know not everyone looks at every tweet that I put out there, but it was just, I was just sifting through stats, and I'm watching the Jags game. I'm like, man, when Agnew's in there, he gets the freaking ball. And I'm just curious what it looks. So I created a stat, which is targets and design rushes per snap. Agnew, if all players, offensive players with 100 more snaps, or receivers and tight ends with 100 more snaps, Agnew is by far getting potential touches, is what I'll call it, more than anyone. It's a bunch of it's like Tyreek Hill is at in the low 20%. Agnew's at 34%. 1 out of 3 times he's on the field, he's getting the ball. No, sorry, that's just a sidebar. I just think that's really funny.
I think that is really funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they create those for him, whether it's reverses or pitches or screens, or in the first matchup in week 3, they put him in the slot, let him go to work on Kenneth Murray. There's plenty of examples in different areas.
And on the flip side was Manhurts is the second lowest potential touches per snap. He's like
Who's their
1%.
blocking tight end?
Yes, it's him, Chris Manor. It's at number 84. So it's him and Mercedes Lewis, I think it was, and like Jack Stoll for the Eagles. But anyways, I think that's what you're taking that card away, not taking the card, but you're going to make it hard for them. So I'm curious if they do go to man, which is a great call. Who does Trevor target? Does he try to go to Zay Jones? Is it Marvin Jones pinning it on him? Those are less. Evan Ingram's got a lot of advantages on linebackers and safeties that try to guard him. He's so freaking fast and pretty strong. So he can just run away from a lot of guys. You're taking that away. That's interesting. The other thing, I think the Jags are really, we talked about this Chargers defense. The one thing that stays the same, they're not that great against the run. Jags have to find those explosive runs. All those motions, get the linebackers communicating, get their capture their eyes. I think we're going to see some movement throws from Trevor, as always. Get those linebackers going every which way. Attack the interior some way, shape, or form. So I think that's what the Jags are going to attack. I think they do a good job of trying to find them, but finding those ETN explosive runs, I think that's going to be huge for them.
No team in the NFL, by Next Gen Stats Info, has allowed more runs on outside runs this season over expectation than the Chargers. The Jags were third in rushing yards over expectation on those plays. And you can feel that when you watch both of those teams.
Watch ETN get to the edge in a second in a blink, place he shouldn't even be bouncing, and he bounces in and it actually works because he's just so freaking explosive.
One small difference on this side of the ball that I think is worth pointing out. Kyle Van Noy played 15 snaps as an off-ball linebacker when they played in week 3. He hasn't played more than 5 in a game since then.
Okay.
He has become much more of a front 4 player. They have Tranquil and Murray as those guys off the ball. And I think they've benefited from that, from figuring out their personnel. So I think that their defense in general has figured it out a lot since then. You know, the way that Michael Davis has been playing for them outside, I think they have a lot of answers. You know, this defense has been really good over the second half of the seasons, especially. The one number that really jumped out to me, Chargers are 20th in the NFL in EPA per dropback and base defense. Not surprising. They're first in nickel.
Makes sense.
So if you're playing a lot of 11 personnel, is that an advantage for the Chargers in this game? If you're going to do some of that heavier personnel, under center play action, the way that we saw them score that touchdown against Tennessee in that need to have it game, do we see more examples of that with them playing with tendencies, getting man hurts on the field and throwing it, those kind of ideas?
Well, that gets Bosa or Mac out as a coverage guy. If you do that, that's what you're doing. So no, that's a great call. Listen to our NFC pod. It's a theme, is getting to some of these defenses, these, Staley Fangio defenses, especially get them in base. It just makes them less exotic. It just makes them more predictable with what they do.
All right. Other side of the ball, your favorite aspect of the Chargers offense against the Jags defense.
I think it's going to be a Keenan Allen in the slot game.
I 100% agree with you.
The Jags are not good guarding the slot. Their second worst defense by his pass success rate against targets to the slot players, bottom 5 in EPA. I think that is where I think the Chargers should be. If I would talk about team games, especially in the playoffs, how they have to have a complete team game plan, offense and defense, playing complementary football is what coaches like to say, especially coaches 60 and older. They like to say, but I think that they should be chucking it. That's how I would go against this defense, is chuck it. And this is actually like, hey, Lombardi, you want to do that quick game stuff? Go for it. I think that is how you go about it. Get Keenan Allen in the slot. I think they have a huge advantage there. I think whatever rookie linebacker they trot out there, if it's Devin Lloyd or Chad Muma, is that you have an advantage there. They're one of those players might end up being okay, but their eyes are not great. So Chargers don't do a lot of at the snap motion, not the jet motion stuff and all that. How they can get to that is play action, naked screens, also not the jet motion, I'm sorry, but split zone, capture those eyes in some way, shape, or form. I think that's how the Chargers offense has to get after this Jags defense.
Personnel wise, the biggest difference between where the Chargers are at right now and where they were in week 3, Keenan Allen did not play. Corey Linsley did not play.
Right.
And the difference when Corey Linsley plays in pass protection is huge for this Chargers team. And he is such a stabilizing force for them.
You don't realize it until you see it again. Like you know it, but then you don't. Once you see the differences with some of these players coming back, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That does matter.
Especially when it's a high level center. When it's a high level center and somebody who's as smart as Corey is.
Yeah.
And I think I totally agree with you on the Keenan Allen stuff, because the Jags have figured out their personnel defensively.
Yep.
So you look at the last game where they really got ripped apart against the Lions. Trey Herndon didn't play in that game, who's now their slot corner. Andre Sisco didn't play in that game. Since then, they have tweaked things on the back end of their defense. Darius Williams has moved outside. They have Tyson Campbell, who's been really, really good in his second season. And now Trey Herndon is in the slot full time now. And you have Sisco and Rayshon Jenkins there on the back end, and Wingard plays a little bit, but that's their starting nickel personnel. That's better than it was for most of the season when they had Williams inside and they were really struggling. But you go back to that Dallas game, if you have somebody in the slot that you like, Trey Herndon is still somebody that you can go after. That's what the Cowboys did with CeeDee Lamb, and that's exactly what I expect the Chargers to do with Keenan Allen. Let's make sure we're attacking the middle of the field, high lows, just going after that area consistently. Because on the outside, even with Mike Williams playing, even if he does play, Tyson Campbell followed him in week 3. That's a matchup that I think the Jags can feel pretty good about. But over the middle of the field against tight ends and just that area, we saw even what a Titans passing offense that has no teeth right now could do against the Jags every so often. Now you get Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert. So that's a little bit better.
Absolutely. It is a little bit better. And I also think too, why I mentioned too, is that chucking the ball is not only just that slot matchup that they have, is that I think the Chargers offense is at a huge disadvantage in the run game. I think especially on the outside, Eckler, a fantastic player. He can run every type of run, short yards, not so much, but he'll go through the interior, but you're not getting the outside against this Jags defense because, you either got Travon Walker or Josh Allen dominating tight ends, and the Chargers tight ends are not great at run blocking. So I think outside runs are going to have difficulty getting going. And then, you see the Chargers interior, their offensive line against that Jaguars defensive line that can really heat you up. So Arden Key and the pass rushing stuff, they have to focus on that on passing downs. But I just think that they're going to have a little tough sledding trying to run the ball against this Jags defense. Then that's why you'll see a lot more of that kind of nickel and dimey passing with Keenan Allen getting heated up a lot.
The Chargers use 12 personnel 18% of the time this season, which is exactly league average. 18.1% of the time, exactly league average. So I would love to see them in 12 personnel and break it apart. Put Gerald Everett at the 2 spot, have Keenan Allen at the 3 against base defenses, and see how much work you can do with that sort of look, because I think that's an advantage for them. Any way you can try to create matchups like that in the middle of the field, I think is how I would go about this for the Chargers.
I would too. Yeah, and that's a great call. And just, again, getting those linebackers. Foy, I don't know, I can't say his last name.
Foye Oluokun.
Thank you. He's a good run defender. Pass defense, he's okay. Even run defense, he pads his stats a little bit. I brought this up on our All Pro show, like the tackle success rate, like what percentage of your tackles led to a successful play for the defense. Why I created a stat was because of Foy. Was because last year I was like, man, he had a lot of tackles, but not a lot of them were 7-yard gains and 8-yard gains. But I think why I'm saying that is what you're talking about: Keenan Allen at 3, Everett at 2, or vice versa. It's that interior, or a rookie linebacker. They can get a matchup there that's very advantageous for them.
Staley this season, especially over the last month or so, has become another one of those guys. And he's always been one, but I think it's been a reminder that I just want to see what his plan is.
Yeah.
I want to see how he wants to attack a team. I want to see what he sees in them. And we've seen him do some weird stuff. Think about the Dolphins game. Think about what they did against the Niners. The fronts they were playing against the Niners, just all over the place, wonky shit. So what they decide to do against what is also a unique offense.
It is.
The Jags and the way that they approach things is different with all the motion and all of just the bells and whistles that they use.
The Bolo punch. It's the Bolo punch offense. That's what it is.
It's a fascinating matchup and one that I'm really going to enjoy.